Hi there, guys. So, I'm here to tell you why The Matrix Resurrections, despite popular opinion, is not only a good film, but is in fact a great film and is possibly even better than the original. Now, if you're still listening, fair play to you, because I know that that is not a popular opinion and that the film has generally received negative criticism, more so from viewers thus far than critics. There is more of a mix when it comes to critical reception. It currently has, I believe, 65 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is certainly not universally popular, but certainly does demonstrate the fact that there is a divide when it comes to the views on this film. So, why do I say that this film is a great movie? The reason is because this film is going beyond the original territory of the Matrix trilogy. And this is what's going to upset, I think, a lot of Matrix fans. This is why the film is getting a lot of negative reception from viewers, because those that are going to the cinema first of all, and those that are watching it on HBO Max, are the ones who are the most diehard fans of The Matrix. And so what they want is to see the world develop. They want the world to be built upon the way that it was in Reloaded and Revolutions. Now, those films, of course, disappointed fans because you were never going to be able to make a film as good as the original. The original was lightning in a bottle. It was able to encapsulate brilliant ideas with unique, groundbreaking action sequences and introduced characters for the first time that we immediately bonded with. There was a panache to it, there was style, there was flair. There was so much about that film that works. And that's the reason why it has such an influence to today, because this whole debate over are we experiencing life in its true form, or are we in some way brains in vats, as the philosopher once put it, Descartes? Are we, in the case of the Matrix, living through a computer simulation and there's a real world, there's a real experience going on somewhere beyond our reach? But we'd have this sense we have this sense that there's something more going on. That's what the Matrix played into. There were those ideas, and then the execution of those ideas within the development of wire technology from kung fu movies made in Hong Kong. Just basically married together some wonderfully original and yet familiar ideas, quirky, eerie ideas with brilliant action set pieces. So much for the Matrix, right? It worked. We all know it worked. That's why uh, Lana Wachowski is able to make a sequel over 20 years later. But this film, Matrix Resurrections, is stepping away from that. So the original set the standard. The sequels couldn't live up to that standard because you were never going to be able to make it as fresh when it came to the ideas and the philosophy and the action set pieces. What the Wachowskis tried to do in the sequels was they tried to go bigger and bolder, more explosions, lots of CGI to try and do things that the original film hadn't done. And it became bloated, it became unwieldy. Particularly, there were scenes in Reloaded where you had all of the Agent Smiths, which were mainly done, you could tell, on a computer, and it didn't have that look, that realism, that believability that the first film had. The first film was doing things that looked incredulous, but it looked real because again of the wire technology that was used, the way that those special effects were pulled off was majestic. And then it was the use of 360-degree camera angles as well, which just heightened the effect. Bullet time, being able to use slow motion technology so adeptly was something which the film was able to achieve. So anyway, I'm waxing lyrical about the first film, but the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm trying to establish how the Matrix Resurrections is very different to the previous Matrix films. The Matrix Resurrections is not attempting to create groundbreaking action sequences. It's not attempting to add to the philosophy of the original film or the sequels. What it's attempting to do is take the mythology of the Matrix and to connect that with real world, real life experience. And why is Wachowski trying to do that? You'd have to ask her. But I believe the reason is because it creates great art. Because let's think about it. We have the mythology of the Matrix. We have everything that the Matrix represents. It represents so many things to so many different people. For some people, it represents the idea of freedom. That's a major theme within the Matrix. For other people, they may interpret it as a rejection of the capitalist structure, breaking out of the straitjacket of the system as it currently exists. There's the idea of destiny, following your heart and believing in faith. There's the religious element, isn't there, that plays within the Matrix as well. That's particularly developed in the sequels. So there are lots of ideas that are floating around. And then for some people, it's just about cool action set pieces. I was just watching actually a video from Will Smith talking about why he rejected The Matrix, the role of Neo, which was offered to him before it was offered to Keanu Reeves. And he said that he rejected it because it was sold to him during the pitch as basically, imagine you could jump up in the air, like way high in the air, and you would just hang there. And then imagine that you would be able to have a camera which would show you up in the air, traveling 360 degrees around you. And basically the film was sold as an action set piece. That's how it was sold to him, and he decided to pass on it and made the Wild Wild West instead, which of course was a fantastic career decision. Um, but that is a major part of what the Matrix is to a lot of people. It's about the action. It's about those set pieces. As I was saying before, the Matrix Resurrections is not about that. The Matrix Resurrections takes the mythology of the Matrix and it melds it with real life experience. So Neo is a games developer, but he's going through mental health issues. He has an analyst. He lacks certainty in himself. He feels uncomfortable in his own skin. And that makes him a very relatable character, a very human character, which is what he was supposed to be in the first film. But the first film, of course, we have the exposition at the beginning. He's this guy in his bedroom. He has this boss who's an arse. And yeah, we have that sense. We have that kind of background of this is a normal guy, just like, any one of us. And that's kind of, put there initially, but very quickly he goes into the world of the Matrix and finds out that he has all these great abilities within that world, and finds out he has great importance to people who are revered within that world. Of course, Morpheus being the particular one. So we don't really get a sense of Neo as an ordinary dude, but the Matrix Resurrections does give us that. It gives us that in a way which is extremely humane and makes his character more vulnerable, more sympathetic, and I think more representative of the age in which we live, where being able to not be perfect is something, particularly for males, is something which we're encouraging expression of. So there's that element to it. That makes him humane. And the fact he struggles when he does go back into the Matrix is something which continues that relatability. But what he really wants, what really motivates Neo in this film, and again, this is something which is different to the sequels, because what motivated Neo? In the first film, in The Matrix, he discovers that he's the one, but he's told by the Oracle he's not the one, he's not sure. It's that typical hero's journey, isn't it? There's this sense of he goes on this journey because it's exciting, but we never truly go beyond the surface and work out what are Neo's real motivations, because the character's not written in that level of depth. He just does stuff, basically. And there's enough stuff going on. There's enough artifice. There's enough entertainment. There's enough crash, bang, wallop, and cool action scenes that we don't spend too much time asking ourselves that question. It's not really the point of the film. The sequels try to develop that a little bit more, and that's where the love angle with Trinity takes on more significance. But the sequels, particularly Revolutions, has much more crash bang wallop than the original does, and is essentially a 2 hour plus set piece extravaganza. So there's no real development of finer emotion in those films. In The Matrix Resurrections, there very much is. And the story is a love story. That's what it is fundamentally. It's a love story, of course, the story with Neo and Trinity. And it's also a story about the power of fiction. It asks questions relating to why we value fiction, why fiction is so important to us. So we watch the first film and we're so concerned about whether Neo will escape the Matrix, whether he will leave the world of fiction, which is the Matrix, in order to be reestablished in the world of reality. But there's an irony, isn't there? Because we were so moved by a story of an individual who wanted to leave the world of fiction. But in being so moved, we keep on returning to this world of fiction, about this world of fiction in which fictionally a character goes back into reality. If you follow what I'm saying there, there's a sense in which there's a contradiction here with the audience. What we want is escapism, but the escapism that we seek is about someone escaping escapism, right? Do you see that? That there's a fundamental irony in the first film. Do we really want reality? The first film would suggest possibly not. What we want is to believe in a world and be part of a world that satisfies us, that satisfies that sense of wanting to be special, wanting to be valued. We see Neo in ourselves and Trinity as well. There are audience members perhaps that see Trinity in themselves, someone who's fearless, courageous, someone who's willing to fight for what they believe in. And Morpheus, his conviction and his knowledge and his sense of wisdom. These are things that we connect with as well. But The Matrix Resurrections is taking that world of fiction and making it feel more real. Because what The Matrix Resurrections wants to be is art. In the way that the original film, The Matrix, was high class, high end entertainment. And in finding that reality in the Matrix experience, what is blended here is the power of fiction to get us to feel, to get us to connect, to have meaning, but also the power of art to reflect ourselves within a film, not to detach, because we're getting into highfalutin territory here. But that, for me, is a fundamental difference between entertainment and art. Entertainment is about detaching and escaping. Art is about reflecting. It's reflecting the human condition, reflecting the human experience within a construct. In this case, the construct is the matrix itself, but the matrix is deconstructed in order to discover the humanity which exists within it, which is something that the first film never even attempted to do, because that's not what the purpose was. And it's something I think that the sequels were skirting around, but were unsuccessful in doing, because it was still too obsessed with the spectacle of itself. So if you're going in for spectacle, you're going to be disappointed, because that's not what The Matrix Resurrections is about. There are fight scenes in there. There are explosions, bullets are stopped in midair. But that's there because it has to be there, and it is part of what The Matrix is. And that's what's so interesting about this film, because it does have Matrix DNA, as you'd expect as a Matrix film, but it's DNA combined with something different. It's postmodernism, because the film is reflecting on itself. Now, some people look at this and see it as a film which is going for nostalgia. It's a cash grab. It literally has scenes from the original film and scenes from the sequels, which play within The Matrix Resurrections as well. And you could look at that and see it as being lazy. You could see it as being self-plagiarism. I don't believe that is the case. I believe that it's taking those scenes from the film in order to relay them to us as a memory of something gone by, as something which has built the architecture for this film, for The Matrix Resurrections, but it's architecture which is being deconstructed and which is being rebuilt into a different animal. You see, Lana Wachowski is older and wiser than she was when she made the original films, and she she is able to put much more of herself into this film. Because in many ways, this film is a reflection on the creative artistic process itself. Neo, in many ways, is a cipher for Lana Wachowski because he is a creator within this film. He's created The Matrix. It's a video game in the Matrix Resurrections, of course. For Lana Wachowski, it was the films, and so he has to deal with a lot of the dialogue and the reflection and a lot of the creative collaboration, reinterpretation of the people that he works with. You know, this is the character of Neo within the film, and this is a reflection of what Lana Wachowski, no doubt, has had to undergo alongside her sister as the original creators of the Matrix films. And so this filters into the film as well. It's a film, as I say, which is partly about the creative process, about the process of creating something which has entered into a wider public consciousness and is then reflected back to you in a different form. And so you ask yourself the question, what even is the Matrix? And that's, you know, from the film, that seems to be a question that Lana Wachowski has asked herself. And this film is an interrogation of that question. What is the Matrix? What does it mean? What does it truly represent? And what Wachowski has done is she's reinterpreted the Matrix to represent something which now is of fundamental value to her at this stage of her life. And that is, it's a story about connection. It's not about any one individual. Perhaps you could even read Neo and Trinity's connection, the way that they work together, as a synergy between the way that the Wachowskis work together in order to create the original films, which would be interesting because obviously only one of the Wachowskis is working on this film. So perhaps scrap that. But my point is that the film it has depth. It has artistic depth to it. There's the humanization of the characters. There's the focus on love and connection, which I think is a really powerful element of the film. And it's a film which is designed to resonate emotionally. It's not a film which is now sort of, you know, playing with the cerebral cortex or going for the dopamine hit of those fast action sequences. It's trying to resonate on a deeper, more humane level. And for me, it very much worked. Now, it clearly hasn't worked for everyone, although I do see a lot of interesting reflections on those who have spent a bit more time thinking about the film rather than just being disappointed about the fact that it's not the same as the original Matrix films. And there is a sense that this film wasn't what I expected it to be. There are elements I didn't like about it, but it interests me. And I would argue that if you take a perspective on this film and see it through the lens of being art and attempt to connect on an emotional level, as opposed to a film which is designed to be spectacle or which is designed to trigger the cerebellum to be essentially a mind fuck for the sake of being a mind fuck. If you can just embrace it as an emotional experience, I think you might be able to get something out of it if you're not too wedded to what you need the Matrix films to be because of what the first film was. So I look at it not as essentially a Matrix film, I look at it as a work of art. And as a work of art, I think it is a beautiful, tender, moving experience, which takes characters that have been mythologized and humanizes them, which takes themes that were partially explored and makes them a centerpiece. It looks at human motivation rather than just human action. And it's driven by passion and real life experience, as all great art, I believe, is. Give it a chance. Let it be, I think, what it's intended to be, which is a beautiful, moving story about finding connection in a world that can often feel depersonalized and can often cause trauma and pain and suffering. and let it be an attempt to be an antidote to that through the love story that exists at its centerpiece and through the reverence that the film pays to art and to story and to the act of creativity. Allow that, if you are a creative person, to permeate through as you watch this as an experience, and just let it wash over you. Just let it wash over you as a piece of art which is intended to find connection with its audience beyond artifice, beyond spectacle, and just purely through the expression of feeling and honesty. And I think there really is something quite profound and quite beautiful to be found within the film if you approach it from that perspective. But anyway, feel free to agree or disagree. That's what it's all about. I just wanted to put my own 2 pence worth in there to add to the debate in my own minuscule way. So this is my attempt to do so.